FOMO led me to meet with another man, and now I'm divorced. Hello, Reddit. I've been lurking here for years, silently reading other people's stories, silently judging some, empathizing with others, and always thinking, that would never be me. Yet here I am now, writing my own post, pouring my heart out because I've messed up my life in ways I never imagined. I honestly don't even know where to begin, but I guess the best place to start is by saying that I'm recently divorced. And the reason? Well, it all started because of something that feels so stupid in hindsight. FOMO, the fear of missing out. I messed up. I let something so trivial, so stupid consume me, and it cost me my marriage. Let's call my husband Chris. Chris and I had been married for about 4 years, and before all of this, we had a great relationship. Sure, we had our fair share of ups and downs like any other couple, but what mattered was that we always worked through them together. Chris is, an amazing person. And then there's me. The woman who had it all but let her own insecurities and weaknesses ruin it. I guess the first mistake I ever made was getting too deep into social media. It started off as something harmless, a way to stay connected with people, share photos, and maybe indulge in a little harmless scrolling during my downtime. I was a stay-at-home wife, and while I loved the quiet and simplicity of my life with Chris, I never really had a lot of friends, so most of my time was spent taking care of the house, cooking, and waiting for Chris to get home from work. I'd fill my free hours with books, TV shows, and sometimes baking experiments, but even then, there was still so much empty time in my day. So naturally, social media became a way to fill those gaps. At first, it was innocent. I'd scroll through Instagram to look at cute recipes, watch funny videos on TikTok, and check Facebook to see what old friends from high school were up to. It was entertaining and gave me something to do when the house felt too quiet. But over time, it started to become more than just a way to pass the time. It became an obsession, plain and simple. I didn't realize it at first, but my life was slowly revolving around a glowing screen, consumed by the lives of people I didn't even know. I'd spend hours scrolling through Instagram, watching TikToks, and reading posts about people who seemed to be living these glamorous, exciting lives. There was always someone posting about a dream vacation in Bali, sipping cocktails at some luxurious resort, or an influencer throwing an elaborate party, surrounded by their equally glamorous friends. Their wardrobes were flawless, their hair and makeup always perfect. Even their lazy days looked like something out of a movie, cozy but effortlessly chic. It wasn't just the influencers either. My own friends, people I grew up with, people I used to see as equals, seemed to be thriving in ways I wasn't. They were out trying trendy new restaurants, going to music festivals, hiking beautiful trails, and having spontaneous girls' nights out. And here I was, in sweatpants, scrolling through my phone for hours while the dishes piled up in the sink. A stay-at-home wife with a relatively simple life. I wasn't necessarily unhappy, but seeing all of that made me feel like something was missing. Like my life wasn't enough. I began to feel small, boring, even insignificant. I started following more and more influencers, lifestyle bloggers, and even random people who popped up on my For You page. The more I scrolled, the stronger the feeling grew. This nagging, persistent fear of missing out. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was silly, that I was just overthinking things. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. It wasn't like I was unhappy with my life. I loved Chris, and I was content in our little bubble. But every time I opened my phone, it felt like I was looking into a world so much bigger, brighter, and more exciting than mine. It made me feel like I was missing something vital, like I wasn't living the way I should be. I started comparing myself to everyone I saw online, friends, acquaintances, influencers, even complete strangers. Their lives seemed so exciting, so full. They were always doing something, traveling, going out, trying new things, and making memories. I'd look at my own life and feel like it paled in comparison. Chris noticed, of course. He's always been the observant type. He'd ask why I was spending so much time on my phone or suggest we do something together. He'd propose going for a walk, trying a new restaurant, or just sitting down to talk. But I'd brush him off. I'd tell him I was fine, that I was just relaxing, that it was no big deal. I genuinely didn't think it was a problem. I mean, everyone uses social media, right? What harm could it really do? But in hindsight, it was already doing harm. Chris would come home from work, tired but happy to see me, eager to share his day or hear about mine. And instead of giving him my attention, I stayed glued to my phone, scrolling endlessly through posts that had nothing to do with me. I was lost in a world that wasn't even mine. Sometimes I'd get annoyed if he interrupted me. If he asked me a question while I was watching a video or tried to initiate a conversation while I was reading a post, I'd snap at him or give him curt responses. It wasn't fair to him, but I didn't see it that way at the time. In my mind, I was just unwinding, and he was disrupting me. The truth was, I didn't just want to live my life anymore. I wanted to live their lives. The people I saw online seemed to have it all. Their lives looked better, brighter, more meaningful. And the more I scrolled, the more I wanted that for myself. That's when the fear of missing out really started to take over. Like it wasn't just a passing thought anymore. It was an itch I couldn't scratch, a feeling that gnawed at me every time I checked my phone. I began to feel like there was this whole world out there that I wasn't a part of, and I wanted in. I would see a post about someone traveling to Paris and think, why haven't I done that yet? It was like a light bulb went off, and I realized that I wasn't living the kind of life I thought I should be living. And then there were the group pictures. You know the ones, people laughing, having a blast at a concert or a party, surrounded by friends. And it hit me. Why don't I have a group like that? I didn't have that kind of social circle, those close-knit friends who always seemed to be doing something. It was just me, Chris, and the occasional neighbor. I felt left out, like I was missing out on the fun. And that's when I started resenting the simplicity of my life. I wasn't unhappy, but the comparison was driving me crazy. It wasn't that I hated what I had, but it felt so small. Everyone else seemed to be out there, seizing the day, doing things that seemed so much more exciting than the boring routine I had fallen into. I'd wake up, clean the house, make dinner, scroll through my phone for hours, and repeat. It wasn't a bad life, but it felt stagnant. I don't know, I guess it's hard to put into words, but the more I looked at my phone, the more disconnected I became from the real world, the world right in front of me. It wasn't just social media, it was the constant comparing. The feeling that everyone else was living a better life, while I was just watching from the sidelines. I decided that I was going to be a part of this world, whether by force or not. I wanted to belong. It felt like I was missing out on something huge, and I wasn't about to sit on the sidelines anymore. I thought, if I could just get involved in this lifestyle, maybe it would make me feel more alive, more connected. So I started going out more. Not just to the usual dinner dates with Chris or the occasional gathering, but I started pushing myself into new situations. I started going to events, trying new things, and stepping outside of my comfort zone. It was almost like I was trying to keep up with a version of myself that I had fabricated in my head. I started getting into content creation too. It wasn't enough to just be a passive observer of everyone else's lives. I wanted to create my own. I began taking photos at every opportunity, setting up little videos of myself in different places, doing yoga in the park, or walking around the city. It wasn't really me, but I told myself it was a step in the right direction. Everyone else seemed to have a curated, perfect life, so why couldn't I have one too? One of the first things I changed was my routine. I started going to the gym. Now, I had always been pretty fit, so I never really had the desire to go to the gym. I preferred outdoor runs or hikes, but seeing how glamorous everyone made going to the gym look on social media, recording workout routines, showing off toned bodies, posing in cute workout gear, made me want to get in on that. I wanted to be part of the cool crowd that had their act together. The influencers I followed made it look so easy and so fun. Their stories were full of gym selfies, pre-workout snacks, and sweaty post-workout pics. I figured, why not? I could do that too. So I signed up for a membership, started taking classes, and began spending hours at the gym. Not necessarily because I loved it, but because I thought it would get me the attention I was craving. And that was when I met James. James was a regular at the gym, one of those people who seemed to have a magnetic energy about him. He was the kind of guy who always knew everyone. Fit, confident, and charismatic, he had a way of making everyone feel like they were his best friend. At first, I didn't really notice him, but as time went on, I started seeing him more and more around the gym. I wasn't really sure why I was drawn to him at first, but I constantly found myself watching him out of the corner of my eye. He seemed so carefree and confident, traits I admired, but didn't always feel I had. I began to feel a little envious. In a strange way, I envied how natural it all seemed for him. I couldn't help but notice how easy he made everything look, how people gravitated toward him without effort, without hesitation. I didn't really have friends, and I wasn't like that. I didn't command attention in the same way. And I had to admit, I wanted that. Soon enough, I found myself trying to time my gym visits so that I would be there when he was. I would shift my schedule around, making sure I was working out at the same time, hoping to cross paths. And sure enough, it didn't take long before our paths did finally cross. It started innocently enough. He offered me a few workout tips, casually complimented me on my form, and made small talk while we both stretched or cooled down. But there was something in the way he looked at me that made me wonder if maybe there was more to it. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing that would have made anyone else suspect anything out of the ordinary. But the way he'd casually brush his hand against mine while handing me a weight, or the way his eyes would meet mine across the room, those things didn't go unnoticed by me. At first, I convinced myself that I was overthinking it. After all, I was married, right? I told myself that I wasn't the type to just jump into something like that. I was loyal. I loved Chris. I wouldn't do something that could break up my family. But then it happened again. Another chat after a workout. This time, it was more personal. James shared a bit about his life, his interests, things that made me realize just how much we had in common. He was into the same movies, had the same hobbies, and even shared some of the same goals in life. I was excited to have someone to talk to who seemed to understand me. The closer I got to James, the more it felt like I was falling for him. At first, I told myself we were just friends, and that it was nice to finally have someone to talk to, someone who actually listened to me. I convinced myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that it was just innocent friendship, that there was no harm in it. After all, I wasn't cheating, right? I wasn't doing anything physical. It wasn't long before we started texting outside of the gym. What had started as casual messages here and there, checking in, making plans, quickly turned into an all-day, everyday thing. Chris was great, but with James, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in so long. Every text, every conversation, made me feel amazing. I couldn't stop myself from smiling at my phone when I saw his name. It became a pattern. Instead of scrolling through Instagram or watching TikToks, I was constantly checking my phone, waiting for his messages. And when I wasn't texting him, I was thinking about him, wondering what he was doing, what he was thinking. Soon, our convos moved from texting to hanging out in person. We started meeting up outside the gym, grabbing coffee or walking around the park. At first, it was innocent enough, just two people spending time together. But the more we hung out, the more I started to feel something shift inside me. I tried to remind myself that it was just friendship. I told myself that this was fine, that there was nothing wrong with spending time with someone who made me feel good about myself. But I was spending more time with James than I was with Chris, and I was doing it willingly. I couldn't help myself. I was a stay-at-home wife, and I had all the time in the world. Chris worked full-time, so it felt like a good opportunity to spend time with someone who made me feel good. And because I was home so often, I didn't have to worry about getting caught. I'd hang out with James whenever Chris wasn't around. James was always just a text away, and the fact that he was so available to me made it feel even more better. We would talk for hours and often lose track of time. I didn't realize just how much time I was spending with him until it started affecting other parts of my life. I wasn't cooking dinner for Chris the way I used to. I wasn't giving him the attention he deserved when he got home from work. I would barely glance up from my phone when he came in, and if I did, I was irritated when he interrupted my convo with James. It wasn't fair to Chris. I knew it wasn't. But at the time, I couldn't stop myself. It felt too good to be wanted. I was emotionally invested in James, and it was starting to consume me. Well, of course, like clockwork, the more James and I hung out together, the more distant I became from Chris. It wasn't immediate, but over time, it became undeniable. I started pulling away from Chris, both physically and emotionally. I was even avoiding his company, not in an obvious way, but subtly. Avoiding dinner conversations, not looking forward to our usual movie nights. I started resenting the times when he would ask to spend time with me, or when he wanted to talk about his day. I wasn't interested anymore. It's funny how quickly things can change, how easily you can slip into something you never thought you'd do. At first, I thought I was just being a little distracted, just enjoying having someone to talk to outside of my daily routine. But the truth was, I was so wrapped up in my connection with James that I became blind to how much I was neglecting my own marriage. I was growing emotionally attached to him, and if I was honest with myself, I knew it wasn't just any friendship. It was the beginning of an emotional affair. The more time I spent with James, the more I realized how much I was leaning on him for validation. It felt like the connection I had with Chris wasn't enough anymore, and that scared me, because I never thought I would feel that way. But with James, I could laugh, I could be myself, and I felt wanted. The distance between Chris and I grew. He started to notice it too, but I brushed it off. I told him it was nothing, that I was just tired or in a funk. And of course, when you're around someone so much, when you're so emotionally invested, it doesn't take long before you cross a line. One day, after spending hours talking at a cafe, James reached over, brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, and didn't pull away. Neither did I. And we kissed. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't something I had ever considered before, but it happened. And it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in months. From that point on, it wasn't just an emotional affair. We had crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and the worst part? I didn't even regret it at the time. From that kiss, it turned into a full-blown affair. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I felt guilty about it constantly, but at the same time, I couldn't seem to stop. Honestly, there were so many times when I wanted to end it, to put an end to the whole thing and just fix what I had broken. But every time I thought about stopping, it felt like I wasn't even present, like I was outside of myself, watching someone else make the decisions, someone else act out the story of my life. I couldn't explain it, I really couldn't. It wasn't even that I didn't care. I cared a lot, but it was like I was trapped, and I couldn't break free from it. I felt like a different person, not in control of myself. And of course, it didn't take long for Chris to figure it out. He wasn't stupid, but he trusted me, maybe too much. He wasn't the type to go snooping through my phone or invade my privacy. And at first, I thought that trust was a shield, that it would protect me, but I was wrong. In hindsight, I was reckless. I didn't delete messages or hide the things I was doing. I wasn't even trying to cover my tracks. I just assumed that Chris wouldn't think twice. I was so wrapped up in my secret life with James that I didn't even realize how careless I had become. By the time Chris found out, James and I had been seeing each other physically for weeks. One night, Chris asked to see my phone. I froze. I knew what was coming. He went through my messages, and just like that, he saw everything. The messages, the plans, everything. He exploded. I can still remember that night so clearly. He was angry, hurt, and beyond furious, and he was right to be. Chris kicked me out that night. I begged him not to and pleaded with him to let me fix things. I told him I was sorry, that I didn't know how things had gotten so out of control, but none of it mattered. He refused to listen. I was so overwhelmed with emotion, with guilt, with regret, that I couldn't even pack my own things. I was crying so hard that I could barely see straight. He didn't show any signs of budging. He kept saying, "You need to leave." He was done. Eventually, he packed my things for me, and I had no choice but to leave. I had nowhere else to go, no family, no real friends. I had isolated myself in so many ways that Chris was the only person I had. But he was done with me, and now I was out on my own. I called an Uber, completely lost, completely broken. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I had to go to James. After everything that had happened, I thought I could go to him for comfort, for shelter, for some kind of safety. He had been the one to pull me in and make me feel like I mattered, and now I had nowhere else to turn. I thought maybe he would take me in until I could figure things out. maybe even get Chris to forgive me. When I arrived at James's place, I didn't expect what happened next. He opened the door, looked at me, and there was no warmth, no reassurance, no care in his eyes. He was annoyed, panicked, asking me what I was doing there. I tried to explain, tried to beg him to let me stay just for a night, just until I figured things out, but he wasn't listening. That's when I heard it, the sound of a woman's voice coming from inside. She came out, asked who I was. And that was the moment I found out James had a girlfriend. No, scratch that. He had a fiancée. A woman who had been with him all along, who had no idea what he had been doing behind her back with me. She came into view, and James tried to lie, tried to downplay the situation, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I told her everything. I told her about the affair, about everything that had happened, about how James and I had been seeing each other for weeks. I didn't even know he had a fiancée, and I was furious with him for lying to me, just like I had lied to Chris. The fiancée didn't hold back. She was furious, livid. She started yelling at James, calling him out for everything he had done, and all I could do was stand there, feeling like the biggest fool. I was the one who had betrayed Chris, and now I was the one being betrayed by James. James kicked me out, told me to leave or he would call the police. I had no choice. I had to leave. I couldn't stay there, not with her angry and him panicking. I left, and for the first time that night, I had nowhere to go. I ended up spending the night on a park bench. It was the lowest point of my life. I had no place, no one to turn to. I was completely alone. And the worst part, I had no one to blame but myself. Every day, I would walk over to the house, hoping that I could catch Chris before he left for work. I was desperate, but also stubborn. I thought that if I could just beg him, plead with him enough, maybe he'd take me back, maybe he'd forgive me. But every time it was the same result. He would listen for a moment, but his expression would harden, and then he'd just shake his head and tell me to leave. I did this for weeks, hoping that something would change, but it never did. Each time I walked away feeling more empty, more hopeless. Then one day, after weeks of trying, Chris finally told me to stop coming by the house. He said that if I showed up again, he would call the police on me. That was the moment it hit me, really hit me. He was done. He wasn't just shutting the door on me, he was locking it, bolting it shut. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was truly alone. I didn't know where to go, and the thought of being without him, without any support, was terrifying. I was already homeless, but now I felt invisible, like I didn't even exist in his world anymore. I'd lost everything, and I didn't even know how to begin picking up the pieces. A few weeks later, I got served with divorce papers. It was Chris who did it himself. I still remember the way my stomach dropped when I saw those papers in my hands. It felt like the ground beneath me had just vanished. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a relationship ending. It was my entire life unraveling before my eyes. I didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to do. I couldn't just keep living on the streets. I had no idea where I'd go, what I'd do. I was completely lost. I begged Chris again, pleaded with him to reconsider, to help me. I told him that I was homeless, that I had nowhere to go. He told me I was stupid. He told me it was insane to think that after everything I'd done, he would take me back. And deep down, I knew he was right. I couldn't argue with him. If I had been in his shoes, I wouldn't have taken me back either. But that didn't stop me from begging. I was desperate. Still, even with everything I had done, Chris wasn't completely heartless. He told me about a job opening at the place where he worked. He said it wasn't great, but it was something. He said it was for a cleaner position, and even though I had a degree, there weren't any openings in my field. My first reaction was shock. A cleaner? I had a degree, I'd gone to college, and here I was, being told my only option was to clean. It felt humiliating. But I also knew this wasn't about pride. It wasn't about what I wanted to do. It was about survival. I had to survive some way. So I took the job. I didn't even hesitate. I didn't have the luxury of time or options. I needed the money. I needed a roof over my head. I needed a chance to rebuild my life, and I couldn't do that without money. I was grateful to Chris, even though I knew he didn't owe me anything. He could have easily turned his back on me, but he didn't. He was offering me a lifeline, even if it wasn't the lifeline I had hoped for. The first few months were hard. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid. And honestly, I was just happy to have some stability, even if it was just the smallest bit of stability. A huge portion of my paychecks went into saving up for a beat-up car. It wasn't much, but it was a step up from the park bench I had been sleeping on. A car wasn't a home, but it was mine, and it meant I didn't have to sleep on the streets anymore. At least now I had some privacy, some control. I could lock the door, roll down the windows, and try to forget, even if only for a little while, about the life I had ruined. I was still homeless, but at least I was no longer completely at the mercy of the world around me. Of course, after some months, the divorce was finalized. I don't even know why it took that long, considering neither of us were fighting it. There was no need for a drawn-out battle. I knew that it was over, and at that point there was nothing left to contest. It felt so final, so absolute. The end of my marriage, the end of everything I thought I had, and it really hurt, even though I had brought it all on myself. The fear of missing out had done this. It had ruined everything. I had let that feeling of wanting more, wanting something else, lead me to make decisions I could never take back. It led me to betray Chris, to destroy everything we had built together. And what did I get out of it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I had thrown away a loving partner, a family, and a life I had worked hard for, just to chase some fleeting, empty feeling. I don't even blame Chris anymore. I can't. He had every right to walk away from me, and honestly, I'm thankful that he even helped me when I was at my lowest. He didn't have to, but he did. He gave me a chance, even if it was just to work as a cleaner at the place where he worked. It was stability when I had none. So yeah, that's how the fear of missing out ruined my marriage. I still think about it constantly. I think about Chris all the time. I miss him so much. But what hurts even more than that, the thing that cuts the deepest, is watching him move on. It's almost unbearable. We still work at the same place, though we're worlds apart in terms of where we stand. I'm just a cleaner, scrubbing floors and taking out trash, while he's up there, higher up in the company, respected, doing things that matter. I'm stuck down here, cleaning up after everyone else. But it's not even that. It's watching him move on with someone else who works there. They're always together now. They have lunch together, stop by each other's desks, check on each other. I even saw them leave work together the other day, and it felt like a knife to the heart. I thought I was over it, but I'm not. It hurts more than I ever imagined it would. I know I have no right to feel this way, but I can't help it. I don't know if I'll ever stop feeling this ache, this constant pain. And the worst part? He acts like he doesn't even know me at work. He's completely shut me out. It's like I don't even exist to him anymore. He doesn't acknowledge me, doesn't even look at me. He's moved on, and I'm just here, stuck in this painful limbo. It's so hard to watch him with her, to watch him move forward while I'm still stuck in the mess I created. I've been job hunting, of course, hoping for something better, a position where I can finally leave this place behind, where I can start fresh. But for now, I don't have that luxury. I can't leave. This job, as humiliating as it sometimes feels, is the only thing keeping me from complete desperation. It's the only way I can keep a roof over my head, even if that roof is the broken down car. The car is a joke, literally a rusted out mess, but it's mine and it's something. It's the only thing I've managed to get for myself. I'm saving, paycheck by paycheck, hoping that someday soon I'll be able to afford a tiny rundown apartment. It doesn't matter what it looks like. A shoebox would be fine. I just need somewhere to call home. Somewhere that isn't the streets. Somewhere that isn't a parked car. So I stay in this job. I stay because I don't have a choice. If I leave now, I could end up with nothing. No job, no money, no future. So I watch Chris. I watch him with her. And it hurts. It hurts so badly. But I have no choice but to keep going. The pain is always there, but I have to keep pushing forward. I ruined my marriage, and now I have to live with that every single day. Why am I even posting this here? Why am I bearing my soul on the internet for strangers to read? I guess it's because I have nowhere else to go. No one to turn to. No one to talk to about how much this eats me up inside. On Reddit. It feels safer somehow to spill your guts to strangers. There's no judgment here, or at least none that I'll have to face in real life. Plus, a part of me hopes that maybe, just maybe, someone out there can take something from this mess I've made of my life. They say one man's mistake is another man's lesson, or at least that's how the saying goes, right? I've made every mistake in the book. I've let the fear of missing out dictate my choices, push me toward destruction. Now I'm paying the price. I know there are people out there right now who are going through the same thing I did, feeling restless, feeling like they're stuck, feeling like there's something more exciting out there, something better, something they're missing. And that feeling, that fear of missing out, can be so overwhelming. It can make you reckless. It can make you blind to what you already have, to the life you've built, to the people who love you. If anyone reading this is feeling that way, I hope they take a step back. I hope they think about what they have to lose. I didn't. I thought I could have my cake and eat it too, and look where it got me. Trust me, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes it's artificial turf, and once you cross over, you'll find yourself longing for the real thing you left behind.